Right. What if the person that everybody calls strong, you know, that person that is among you that everybody is saying, like, this is the most resilient person, this is the more confident person, this is the most strongest person I've ever seen. What if that particular person is actually struggling in silence and nobody knows about it because they are afraid to speak up? Today, we are going to be talking about something that affects a lot of family. It affects children. It affects our community. But it is still difficult for many people to discuss openly. And you all know that that is called mental health. That is what we're going to be talking about today. Hello, everybody, and welcome to our show again, our children, their safety. So Nelly and I, we are going to be covering an amazing topic today. And of course, it's a topic that people don't want to talk about it, but hey, we are here to be open about it. For anybody who doesn't know me, my name is Peggy Barre. I'm the founder of Arise and Thrive Academy, and I'm going to pass it to Nelly to introduce herself.
Hello there. Welcome to another session. My name is Nelly Kwasonwe. I am a social worker, transformational life coach, and founding director for Hand in Hand Community CIC. Mental health is something that I'm very passionate about. I can talk about it every day, anywhere. I know Peggy has introduced the topic, and we know mental health has such a big stigma, taboo in our communities that we don't talk about it. But then we experience mental health all the time. Mental health is very different from mental illness. So today we will be talking about mental health, which is different from mental illness.
That is so true, Nelly. I think that is the beginning starting point, first of all, to distinguish and define what is mental health. Because I feel that, again, for us as a community to really understand the severity of this is to actually know the difference. What is the difference of mental health and mental illness?
Yeah. Oh, is that a question?
Yes.
Okay. So, mental health is the state of our minds,
Mm-hmm.
and we all have minds. We can be upset, which are emotions, they are
Mm-hmm.
feelings. It is okay because the emotions, the feelings that we experience are normal. But then the problem is, how do we behave when we experience those, whether emotions or feelings?
Mm-hmm.
But then mental health is on one side and mental illness is on the other side. So they're on both on extremes.
Mm-hmm.
Each and every one of us falls somewhere along that line.
Mm.
So we all have mental health. But then if your mental health affects your daily living, for instance,
Mm.
you struggle to get out of your home because of anxiety, depression, that is affecting your quality of life. And that is where mental illness comes in. Now,
Mm.
in our community, because there's a big stigma around it, people don't
Yeah.
want to talk about it. So then they don't seek help early enough.
Yeah.
Someone will be presenting with symptoms for mental illness, but they will
Mm-hmm.
say, I've not been diagnosed. Again, not all mental illnesses are
Mm-hmm.
diagnosed. For instance, jealousy is a mental illness
Yeah.
or is a mental problem, but that cannot be diagnosed. So it's for us to know what mental health is, what mental illness is, and to know at what point do we need to seek for help. Remember, it is how your mental health affects your day to day living, your
Mm-hmm.
quality of life.
Mm-hmm. That is so true. Because I feel that again, well, we're going to be talking about this because again, we are talking about why is it a taboo in our community. And when we're talking about a community here, we're talking most of the Afro-Caribbean community, right? So it's very important. Thank you for that distinction of that definition, because I think it clarifies something. And you just mentioned something: jealousy is a mental health. And if it is not controlled, then it becomes. I'm laughing because today we were just talking about it. We're talking about jealousy, and we're talking about it to the point where it got this particular person to a point where the person could not stand people around her, right? So in that way, it now isolated her, and then of course it upset others, which of course affected her life, her way of living, which you can see how small thing like emotion that has not been controlled, and then it turns into something else. So we are talking about the taboo. Why is it a taboo? And I feel that for some communities, we are taught again from the beginning. What is that? What has been passed on to us from that young age? What do our parents think about mental health? Do they even believe that there's something as mental health or mental illness? And has that been passed down onto us? So these are some of the things, that languages that we were not taught, and we don't feel comfortable to talk about it. So these are all beliefs, which I feel that is a starting point for us to talk about the beliefs. Why is it that we're not talking about it? Which comes down to the beliefs.
Yeah.
And some of the beliefs that I have, especially even also as my own personal experience, is that one of the beliefs that tells you that you are taught in your family that you need to keep your problem to yourself, right? If you're going through in fact, we were so busy, and we thought that the struggling lifestyle and all of that was a normal, that you're going through it, you don't even pay attention, you don't even. And some of them will say that, like, pray about it and move on. You can be talking about somebody and something like, I'm struggling with my mental health, I'm struggling to focus, I'm struggling to sleep, and then they're suggesting something else rather than just directing you to that point, like, this is a mental struggle which you need to seek help. Yeah.
Yeah, because in our communities, there's a lot of misinformation
Mm.
because, like you've talked about, people struggling with mental health issues and
Mm-hmm.
they want to seek prayers for them to
Yeah.
get healed because they believe there is that they are being cursed or they are
Mm.
being punished for something they did spiritually and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
But then
Mm-hmm.
that is a lack of knowledge and still living in denial. Because if
Yeah.
people live in denial, there's that belief there.
Yeah.
And mental health is associated with shame,
Mm-hmm.
blame,
Mm-hmm.
curse. And I remember, I don't know if you know about this, like in, I mean, in many, not even if you remember about it, in many, many African countries, I'll say
Mm-hmm.
Cameroon, where I grew up, talking about mental health was not something that we knew about. We knew people to be crazy, mad,
Yeah.
insane, and things like that. And just as I'm speaking, I remembered one time along Commercial Avenue in Bamenda, I was walking and I saw someone who looked very unkempt, and I knew it was a mad person
Yeah.
because previous experience was that I don't know, people like that are always drawn to me. I've never known why that's the situation. So,
Mm.
as I saw this person, I crossed the road, and as I put up my head, they crossed the road as well. I
Right.
crossed again, and they crossed the road. And I was like, what is going on? So, I had that experience so many times. But then I was really scared because of the beliefs that I had that mad people, or I mean, it was not even mental health, it was mad people, that mad
Mm.
people are very dangerous because they can beat you up, they can do anything. They're very aggressive, they're violent. Those were the
Mhm.
beliefs that we had. Fast forward, when I started learning about mental health, because I was really, really curious to know more about mental health, I realized that that was not the case. And again,
Yeah,
that helped me to shift my beliefs from people who are crazy are very violent to
yeah,
mental health is something that everyone experiences because it is a state of our minds. So it's for us to start looking at those beliefs, break them down. And like you talked about religious beliefs, there are also role of gender stereotypes. For instance,
yeah,
they say men do not feel the pressure and they have to appear strong and to hide their emotions, which that's a belief that a lot of men have grown into that. And that's why some men struggle to express their emotions because that belief is still there. Whereas for women, it is different because women when women struggle emotionally and they express it, they will dismiss their struggles and say, "You are being too dramatic. You are just making that up. You are too emotional," and things like that. So again, that goes down to beliefs, and
mhm,
is you have beliefs around social media influences where people come on social media and they say, I mean, they put all the nice things, and you struggling, you feel that, oh, it's just me struggling, but you don't know the mask behind it. So it's for us to question. I always say, question
yeah.
everything that you see. And like for social media, watch social media and believe it at your own risk. Because
Absolutely.
yeah.
Absolutely. No, that's so true, Nelly. And when we're talking about mental health, if you've read statistics, it says, like just in statistics in England, I know people may be watching from any other country, but hey, this happens wherever. But the statistics of England, it says roughly 1 in 5 adults experience mental health.
I think just to add there, Peggy, I think globally it's one
Yeah,
in four.
you see,
If it's
1 in 4.
globally. So imagine 1 in 4.
Yeah. So that is a
Mhm.
huge thing. That is a topic that we experiencing it, whether we like it or not. And it is it is better that we talk about it because many people are struggling in silence because again they don't want to talk about it. And that taboo within a community, it plays a bigger role because we feel like if we talk about it, we're opening up, or showing our vulnerability, and there is this fear of people always saying that, what will people say? Will I be judged? Will they judge me? Because within that community, if especially if they don't know that distinction between mental illness and mental health, once you open your mouth and tell somebody that, hey, I'm struggling to focus, I'm struggling with depression, maybe I'm struggling with anxiety, they are just going to blow it out of proportion, you know, because they may not even know how to help you. They may not know what it entails, and as a community. And again, because sometimes, especially speaking from the perspective of parents, sometimes you also feel like, you know what, I don't want to show my vulnerability, especially because I want to show people that, you know what, I can handle this, I can do this. But deep down within you, you actually, chipping away in pieces without even you realizing. So it is very important that we need to go back to that root. And again, sometimes we always say it's about even looking. We know that we're talking here about faith, we're talking about resilience, and we're talking about our community support. These are all great. These are all great. It's good to be resilient. It's good to have a faith. It's good to have that community support. But we should never, these things should never become a reason why we should stay silent and struggling, especially if we know that we're experiencing a mental health or struggling with our mental health. Yeah, yeah, I don't know, Nelly, if you crack. I was just trying to look at the points, our pointer points that we have
Okay, just
to
before we
help
go to
guide
the
our conversation.
Yeah, just before we go to the next point, I just want to share. I know I have shared so many times, and I will continue to
Mhm.
share my experience with mental health because my perception is that talking about it will help other people to talk about
Yeah,
theirs too or to become aware of it. So during
yeah.
lockdown, I experienced work burnout. That
Mhm.
meant I could be speaking like I'm speaking now, and my mind will go blank. I would not remember what I was talking about. I would remember where that conversation was going to. I'll just be blank.
Mhm.
I could not sleep because I just had racing thoughts in my mind. I could not eat. Many things were going wrong with me. I was easily agitated. Those are
Mhm.
all symptoms
Yeah,
that I was struggling with my mental health,
yeah.
to the point that I went to the doctors because it really affected my day to day living. I went to the doctors and they made a diagnosis of insomnia, which meant I was struggling to sleep, and they
Mm.
prescribed medication. So from then, I decided to be talking about mental health because I knew from my experience working in mental health settings that people struggle with mental health, but especially in our community, we did not want to talk about it. So I went on social media like we are speaking now, and I started talking about mental health to raise awareness. I felt that was the right thing for me to do at that time. But then those in my community, they rang me to say, Nelly, why are you talking about mental health? And I was really, really surprised. And I was like, why don't you want me to talk about mental health? And they said, in our community, we don't talk about mental health. We are strong. Mental health is a white man's thing. And I was like, oh. So their intention was for me not to talk about mental health, just to
Yeah.
go with the flow that we don't experience mental health. We are strong and all whatnot. And I was like,
Mm.
okay. But instead, that really motivated me because I did more and more. I talked about mental health until today. I talk about mental health. I talk about mental health openly, whether in public, whether in occasions or wherever. If I'm called to talk about mental health, I talk about it because I know wherever I am speaking, there are people who are struggling but still have those beliefs that they are strong. They don't have to talk about it, or health is for some people and not some people. But like I said at the very beginning, mental health is different from mental illness, and we need to know so that we can identify when our mental health is impacting our day to day living so that we are able to seek help early and to prevent crisis.
That is so true. And this is where we talk about our first point was talking about breaking the silence because
Yeah.
it's about taking that courage, that first step to break the silence, and breaking the silence just means expressing how you feel. Don't bottle it up. We don't have to bottle things up. And it's just the same like my own experience that, my relationship broke down and I came out of that environment, it was tough. It was tough. That moment where you're trying to juggle everything and then you're having guilt, you're looking at your kids, you're having, feeling sorry for everybody, blaming yourself, you know, all this emotion, mixed emotion just descending on you. And this is what we were saying, that at that moment, how do you manage those emotions? Are they affecting you? And to be honest with you, it really did affect me. It really did affect me. I wasn't eating. I wasn't eating. It was affecting my sleep. I couldn't sleep well. I will always be, was just so tearful. And then again, I felt like I could feel it in my body. I could really feel it in my body. But then is that sort of thing that you're looking at, okay, yes, this is how I feel, but I don't want to talk about it. I don't want to talk about it because if I talk about it now, especially from coming from the perspective of a single parent, Nelly, I see a lot of parents that they're really struggling with their mental health, but they don't want to speak up because they feel that if they speak up, it's going to be used against them. They're going to be used against them, or either to take their children, or maybe to label them, or maybe to start seeing them incapable and all of that. But we are here today to break that misconception. and to break that belief that if you open up, if you break the silence, something bad is going to happen to you. On the contrary, if you don't break the silence, if you don't break that silence, if you don't speak up, that is where things are going to get worse, and it's even going to affect you more. And not just you, it's going to affect your children as well. So this is why we are talking about it, and we're not feeling shy. We're not feeling, like we've been there, and we are still going through it. There are some days that you have to pull yourself, you're still pulling yourself out of that bed, you're still feeling so demotivated, but these are all emotions. But the key is, how do you deal with it? And this is why Nelly and I, we are still growing, we are still learning these things, to say, okay, this is how I can manage my emotion in a more better way. And what's best way is to talk about it, just like we're doing today.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the reason we are talking about it is to help other people who are shy to
Mm-hmm.
talk about it. Even if you don't want to talk about it, but recognize it and look for someone who is there to listen. Because sometimes we want to talk to our friends, to those in the like neighbors and all whatnot, who are not in a place to help us. But then
Mm-hmm.
when we talk like this, it's for you to become aware. So when you
Yeah.
start struggling, look for someone you trust that you can
Mm-hmm.
confide in. You can go to your GP. You can go to a health visitor if you have children. You can go to, seek help. If you are at the university or college, you can also seek help because there are counseling services and well-being support. So there's
Mm-hmm.
always help out there. It's for you to go get that help so it doesn't affect you, because the longer you stay with mental health that is not treated, that's
Mm-hmm.
how bigger it becomes, because
Yeah.
it increases. You cannot just sit and say, oh, you will pray or you will fast or you will. No, you need to deal with it. Sometimes it's a matter of just talking, because when
Mm-hmm.
you talk, you give space in your mind mentally, and then
Yeah.
you figure out certain answers.
Mm-hmm.
So it's to develop the habit that you can talk. If you don't want to talk to people, you can write that down to yourself or
Yeah.
even talk about it on the phone. And then, like I use this with my clients, I say, talk about what you are worried about. Speak on your phone, record it, and then keep it to rest. And
Yeah.
then when you feel that you are really calm, listen to that message. I say, imagine you were upset and you spoke to someone the way you spoke on that phone. How did you feel? And most of them always has a change. I'm like, oh, I didn't know I sounded like that. I was very aggressive. I was very rude. I was swearing and all whatnot. So then that already gives them a different perspective, because they know that, oh, the person receiving that message will get hurt by that message. And then
Yeah.
they'll start thinking and reflecting on a smoother way of dealing with conflict. Because even if conflict, no matter how bad a conflict is, conflict resolution uses relationship skills that communication will help, rather than, say, giving a silent treatment.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think it's just that courage to step out and talk about it. And you mentioned something. The first thing that, first of all, if we want to break that silence, is by us building our understanding around the mental health. What is it about? It's about, thank goodness, I think we've talked about this so many times, Nelly. Thank goodness for technology today. That if there is anything that you're feeling like, what, I don't understand, you just Google it on your phone. You will see tons, if not what content to read, but what to listen to, books to read about. It's about understanding, first of all, how, if I'm feeling this way, Google it. What is it? Why am I feeling this way? And it's about understanding it, because when you understand it, when you start looking for that information to understand it for yourself, then that is when you understand the importance and the severity of how you, because again, sometimes we are very dismissive of that struggle. But if we start to read about it, to gain understanding around the way we feel, then it out gives us that courage and confidence to be able to speak up. And it actually helps us to take action, especially if the thing has gotten to a severe state where it's actually debilitating, it's actually affecting our day-to-day routine, then that is when we can take it seriously. So it's very important to build understanding, and then talk about some of and it's about that reflection, because Nelly, you mentioned something there. It's about reflection as well, that again, if we reflect back that where I'm coming from, this thing that I'm feeling, what is the perception about it in my community? What is the perception about it in my family? Were there people that were going through this thing? Were they experiencing this thing? How did they deal with it? And this is a way of just gaining understanding again around this whole thing. And like Nelly said, if you look in within your own household and you think that there's nobody fit for me to discuss this thing or disclose this thing with, then that is when you need to step out and find somebody outside of that network, that circle, somebody whom you can trust, somebody whom you think they're knowledgeable, somebody whom you think they can support you on that journey, you know. But whichever way, you need to break the silence. You don't have to suffer alone. And don't feel that people are not going to believe you. Yes, there are people that will look at it and say, oh God, you don't have to talk about it. But there are also millions and people who are willing to also open their ears and listen to you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, that's really great, Peggy. Thank you. You know, when you were talking about searching on Google, I just thought I'd say something about that because with technology, sometimes it's good, sometimes it is bad. It's just to be mindful
Mm,
how you use it.
yes.
Because now, if you have a symptom and you go on Google and you type it, it is easier for you to dwell so much on those symptoms to the
Yes.
extent that you start living the indicators of those symptoms to the extent that it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. You will
Mm-hmm.
develop symptoms mentally that you don't actually have them physically.
Yeah.
So when doing those searches, be very mindful. Like Peggy said, do those searches to inform you, but
Yeah.
then confirm whatever you are going through with a professional who is specialized in the field. Don't be doing how do you call it?
Self-diagnosis.
Self-diagnosis, because it's really common. For instance, if it's something like say depression, they
Mm-hmm.
have a criteria to determine depression, but someone might say not sleeping properly, and they say,
Mm-hmm.
oh, that is one symptom, therefore
Yeah.
I'm depressed. No, it's not. They have criteria. You have to meet certain criteria for the professional to determine that you are having depression, and it has to last for a certain period of time. So just be very careful with self-diagnosis, because it can lead you to take some medication or to adapt to some things that are hurtful to yourself unknowingly when you feel that you want to make yourself better.
Absolutely. That's so true. And one thing we have to also talk about is, again, when we're talking about these things, we are talking not the fact that it affects just you, the individual. I'm talking, for example, like I'm a mom. If I'm going through, like, if I the time that I was struggling with my mental health, if I did not speak up, if I did not seek support, if I did not, come try to walk myself out of it, we are talking about the impact that it has on the children, people with you, people who are living with you. It can not only affect even your children, it can affect, workplaces. You see some people, they come to work and they are so aggressive. They are, the way they talk to people, the way they treat, customers. And you're wondering, is there something wrong with you? Is everything all right with you? And it's like, yes, I'm okay. But you're looking at that person, something is not right. That is just being them expressing. In fact, their body, their action is telling the truth, but their mouth is refusing the truth, you know. And this is where it's very important that as parents, is we have to be watchful of our emotions, watchful of what is happening in our bodies, watchful what is happening in our minds. And if we feel that we cannot deal with it, we need to seek proper help, because if we don't, then that is something that we are laying for our children. It's going to affect them, because think about the environment. How can you raise children in an environment where it's not mentally stable? How is it going to affect the children? So again, these are some of the things that we need to be mindful of, about.
Yeah, I mean, like you rightly said, it doesn't affect just an individual. It affects parents, children and young people, families, workplace, and our community as well. When you were talking, I remember the situation. One of my managers that I had, she, the way she spoke to me, because we had an open plan office, she
Mm-hmm.
would talk to me as if I was a child. But then I was thinking, even my children, I speak with my children with respect. So she
Yeah.
would talk to me and shout at me, but then when she'll be shouting, I'll just be looking at her quietly. But in my head, I'll be thinking, what is wrong with her? Yeah, and
Yeah.
I agree that she was my manager, but there was something with her personal life that she was
Yes.
struggling with. And I kept questioning myself. But then she would get angry that I'm talking to you and you are looking at me and just staring at me. And then I'll be like, I didn't know what to say because I had nothing to say. Because
Yeah.
she would she would criticize me and even criticize my English. I'm like,
Yeah.
yeah, no, English is not my first language. But if I speak my own first language, you won't understand. But
Yeah.
the sense of the message that I want to pass is clear. It's just, and it will be something like a comma, a semicolon, a full stop that I did not put. I'm like, I don't know that level of English. I just do.
Yeah.
But then she would get really angry. And just recently, I was speaking with one of my colleagues. We were on the same, not, we were not on the same team, but we were in the same office. And she said her team were really, really worried about me in my own team because of the way that my manager was treating me. And I was like,
Hmm.
but I was okay because to me, it didn't pass through me because she
Yeah.
was speaking and I knew clearly that she was having some personal issues. But it was not my position to ask her, that's her cup of
Mm-hmm.
tea. So,
Yeah.
yeah, it affects, we just need to think about the people that mental health can affect. And if we speak up, we will first of all help ourselves and then
Mhm.
indirectly or directly help other people.
Absolutely. And for me, the key here is the awareness. Sometimes it's not just for us, it's for others. Because
Yeah.
if I'm aware, now that me, you, and I, Nelly, we are aware of it. That's why when you see somebody comes to us and say, I'm struggling with this, we know it. We understand it. We will not judge that person. That's the same way that we're saying that you as well, you may what be watching and you may not be going through it, but you can be a helping hand. You can be that shoulder that someone else can lean on. You can be that voice that you can actually calm somebody or tell somebody or kind of, support someone who is going through that journey. Because if we're talking about a community, yeah, a community is a combination of people with different skills, with different specialities, with different needs, and at different levels. So if we're talking about a community coming together, especially the Black Caribbean Afro-Caribbean community, we are talking, say, you know what, if I spot somebody struggling, I am there to support that person without judging them. And how can you support someone if you yourself you don't even understand that subject or understand what they're going through? So this is why awareness, we're raising awareness that hey, mental health is real. It is real. All the beliefs that we have about it, we need to start, dismantling those beliefs. We need to start, we need to start, how do you call it? We need to start stopping the stigma, the stereotypes, and all of that, and start debunking some of the beliefs that we already have in our head, because that is the only way we can proceed as a community to make sure that mental health is not something that cannot be talked about.
Exactly. And then now we move smoothly to how do we create
Mhm.
change? We have been
Yeah.
talking about how we create change. This part
Mhm.
now is for us to identify the practical ways that we can normalize healthy conversations. Because
Mhm.
when you when I mean we are talking about mental health, but then people are like, oh, I don't want to have that awkward conversation. It's a conversation. So it's now for you to be aware of, if you don't, I mean, there are many different ways that you can get information from someone without using the word mental health. Because when you start with how is your mental health, already that's a big blockage.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
because using things like how are you feeling today, people find it very difficult to answer the question.
Yeah.
But it's something that when we continue to ask, and if you ask, how are you feeling today? Because we are used to how are you, and the answer is fine. If someone says
Mm.
fine, like for me, what I do is I say, oh, you've said you're fine, that's good, but what does fine mean to you? Because your fine is not the same as my fine. So what does that mean? So when you ask and then you ask follow-up questions, it encourages people to be talking about to explain more what
Yeah.
that is.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And again, we're talking about ways of creating that change, having that healthy conversation, like you say. It starts from, first of all, believing in your own self, that you know what, by recognizing that I am going through this challenge. So it's by acknowledging that difficulties that you're struck that you're having. Don't hide it, don't sweep it under the carpet, because you cannot find a solution to a problem that you don't know, or a problem that you think does not exist. Right. So the first thing first is recognition. When Nelly was going through burnout, she spotted it. I don't know how, but there was a time where she said, you know what, this is not right. This is not what I'm feeling. When I was going through my own struggles, I knew that deep down within me, there was something that was not right. So it's about acknowledging it first. And then from there, we can now move towards having getting the support. And we're talking about practical ways of change. Practical ways. We'll talk again about finding that one person that you feel I can open up to. Now, I'm going to be talking this, like, especially for parents, single parents who may not want to see their GPs, who may not want to, because there's some parents that, Nelly, I've spoken to a lot of them, that they're struggling. They say, no, I don't want to tell my GP that I'm going through this, because they feel that if they tell the GP is going to pin it down. And just that, there's something about that word mental health. Some people don't want it to, but they don't. This is where they don't understand that, hey, mental health is not mental illness. The GP is not going to pin it down on you to say that, you know what, you've got you're just even that GP who is consulting you is struggling at some point with their own mental health, which is okay, it's normal.
You know, Peggy, I really get it when parents are scared to even speak to their GP about their mental health. Because
Mm-hmm.
as a social worker, I have had cases, I have heard other my colleagues' cases whereby
Mm-hmm.
the parent is struggling with a mental illness,
Mm-hmm.
but they don't want to share it with social workers. And
Right.
I get that because, okay, now my background coming from, I mean, I worked in the mental health sector for nearly 10 years before I got onto the social work training.
Mm-hmm.
And when I was qualified and working with children and families, when referrals, because I indicated to my managers that I am more interested in mental health. So if there's any case that is linked to mental health, let them allocate that to me. So I have had like difficult conversations with my manager, with my
Mm-hmm.
managers, whereby a case comes in and the parent or one of the parent is struggling with a mental illness, and they say, oh, that is a red flag. And I've said repeatedly that parents or individuals having mental illness is not a criteria that they can't look after their parents. I said, if a parent is struggling with their mental health, there need to be things or questions that we need to look answers for.
Mm-hmm.
If the person is struggling mentally, do they have do they have access to mental health support? Are they engaging with mental health support? How is their mental health impacting on their parenting capability? And
Mm-hmm.
not that because they have mental health is a red flag that children have to be put on plan. Because I've had that argument, I said no. And it got to the point where my manager flagged that up and
Mm-hmm.
made a report to the service manager to say that they were concerned about my risk assessment abilities. And I'm like, I've worked in rehabilitation centers. I've worked in the prison. I've worked in secure units. We see that, so my level of risk linking to mental health is very different from a social worker, and there are many social workers who do not have any idea about mental health. They know about mental health on paper, but they've never
Mm-hmm.
sat with someone who is struggling with mental health. So I'm like, obviously it'll be different the
Yeah.
way I would assess it. And and that's something that I feel I've spoke to a number of people, and I've said, you know what, if I am to make a recommendation, I would say every social worker needs to do mental health training and even
Yeah.
do placement with a mental health setting. Because when you have that experience, your perception about mental health will change.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. And this is where you will see that the way you'll be supporting that parent is different. You're going to be supporting them with some empathy. You're going to be supporting them with some, because you're separating the label from that individual. There are some people that you see them that, yes, you've mentioned that sometimes mental illness can actually affect, the way they're parenting. But you see a majority of a single parent, they are struggling with their mental health, but that does not disqualify their parenting skills or disqualify their parenting abilities. They are still there for their children. And this is where it needs to be made clear and made to parents to understand that, which of course this is one of the venue of which we are expressing that, you know the fact that you're struggling with your mental health does not disqualify you from being a good parent. And that, if for you raising it or speaking up would not affect, you know your affect your relationship with your children, or except, what am I trying to say? I'm trying to distinguish, because there you're talking about mental illness and mental health. So this is where we have to distinguish that, look, there's some, if you're struggling with maybe anxiety, depression, you're going through like lack of sleep, sometimes you're just overwhelmed, and you're going through things like maybe blaming yourself on all of this. And if those things are actually affecting you, your day to day, then speak up. I don't feel that you going to the GP is going to prevent, or they're going to take your children away from you just because you've gone and expressed that this is how you're feeling.
Yeah, Peggy, as much as we say people need to seek help, I'll speak now from the perspective of a social worker.
Mm-hmm.
When it is very common, I've seen it many times,
Yeah.
whereby if a parent or if a family is under social services, professionals, social workers, health visitors, school, it seems as if they're just looking for one issue. So
Mm.
if a parent is struggling, they would want to keep it to themselves, though we encourage that speak to your GP. But like you said rightly, it will go against them because they'll say, oh, mental health is another red flag. So
Yeah.
then they will keep on putting pressure on the parent who is already struggling
Yeah.
because they're being very judgmental, which is
Yeah.
what I go back to my previous statement that I made, that if social workers or those in the caring profession have the experience working in mental health, their perceptions will change. Because
Yeah.
I
True.
have had experiences where, even down to communication, day to day communication, I have had situations where I've walked um, into a hospital to do health, to do general health care work. I've gone
Mm-hmm.
there and the nurse is angry, upset because she had been trying to administer medication to a patient, but the patient was refusing. So that continuous talking, talking, you have to take your medication because if you don't take it, you'll get worse and things like that. But then the way she was speaking was getting the patient more agitated.
Yeah.
So there was one time I noticed that, and I went to this nurse. I did not know that was my first time because as an agency staff, I used to go to many different places. So that was my first time meeting this client and the staff and even that ward. So I suggested to the nurse that since you have to administer medication to the other patients, let me
Mm-hmm.
sit with this patient. And she was hesitant. She said, no, you have to take your medication now, else you'll get very, very poorly. So I was like, please, just let me sit with her. Obviously, I'm sure the nurse doubted because that was my first time in that ward. But
Mm-hmm.
anyway, she agreed. And as I sat there, I just introduced myself to the patient. And I was like, how do you feel today? Because when I was approaching her, she was like, oh, you are one of them. And I was like, oh, yeah, I'm one of them. I'm a health carer. So obviously, I'm one of them. So
Mm-hmm.
then I introduced myself and I said, how do you feel today? I don't know whether it was my tone or whatever, but she was like, she looked at me and she was like, oh, you sound different. No one has asked me that question since I've been in this hospital. What they do is they only come and say, take your medication, take your medication. And then she offered me a chair. So she was right up there and she just
Yeah.
dropped. She offered
Wow.
me a chair and I sat there. We spoke and spoke for hours. She was not meant to be on one to one, but because she was very critical, because she was high risk of falls and she had like four tubes connected to her body. So they were just hanging like that.
Mm-hmm.
So that was because she was very critical and she was really agitated. She wanted to go home. I
Mm-hmm.
intervened and she was calm. We spoke for hours and hours and hours. I didn't have to even to go eat myself. I didn't have a break. And
Mm.
then when the nurse noticed that that patient had calmed down, she walked in and said, "Nelly, go." And as the patient just heard that, she jumped up and she started again. And I had to sit there. So I said, listen, communication matters.
Yes.
It matters
Absolutely.
a lot because like in a lot of the trainings that I've done, we use de-escalation techniques. But then if you don't have that experience, if you don't have that skill, you will only be
Mm-hmm.
insisting that you have to take the medication or else you'll get very sick and things like that. And then it will be escalating the other person's responses.
That is so true. That is so true. And I think that that comes back to ourselves, especially within our community. The way we respond. If somebody were to come to me and, well, now I will respond differently because now I am aware. Now I know. And just like you said, it is always good for all profession for and I always say sometimes it's good even in your profession to step out of that box of your profession and learn something. Not learn to be aware because we are dealing with people will possess, people will come with different scenario, possess scenario. The more we widen ourselves, try to know more about these things, because now it puts you, look at the way that client spoke with you, look at the way you interacted, look at the way you even build that rapport first of all with that client. It's because you were aware, and you know the way, the language, even the tone to use, the language, the word choices to use, very, very important. So again, this is something that as a community, we are learning to make sure that if you find somebody comes to you, a sister, a brother, or whoever comes with you in your community and say, I am going through this, what will your language, what is your first response going to be? What is your tone of voice going to be? Are you going to respond with empathy or judgment? Because the way we respond, this is our reaction is how we either make or break this community, this ecosystem that we're trying to build, to make sure that everybody is comfortable with speaking, with about comfortable about speaking, about mental health. So it's the language matters, just like
Yeah.
you say.
Because just imagine someone is living their daily lives, being stressful, living in
Mm-hmm.
a dark place, and they gather the courage to come talk to you. And then when
Yes.
they talk to you, say, God forbid. And then
Mm.
you say, hey, just keep it to yourself. Already that person feels rejected. And imagine they have really gathered the courage to talk to you, and that's the response you give them. That person, probably that was the only chance
Mm.
that they had to really express themselves, but you shut them down. And it might take them forever to gather that courage again to ask for help. So we need to get into trainings to know our language, because
Mm.
communication, I say, in the African Caribbean community is something that we need to work on all the time. Because myself, I still work on communication. I know I've improved my communication, but it's something that the learning is ongoing.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. I think we've talked about, and one thing that we've talked about is that, and again, when we talk about mental health, you're talking about coming from domestic abuse perspective, Nelly, is the fact that also you see people that have been through domestic abuse, because it's like a cycle. It's like a cycle. When you go through the prolonged domestic abuse, of course, it affects your mental health, and if it's not dealt with, it becomes mental illness, and then that cycle is a whole cycle. And one thing that we always say, eh, as a domestic abuse practitioner, is that if somebody muster the courage to come to you to tell you that I am experiencing this in my community, or experiencing this within my marriage or relationship, the first thing that you need to do is, first of all, believe them. Believe them. And this is where it's going to, first of all, break down that barrier for them wanting to either open up or not open up. Is about believing them, because again, we don't have to be the judge. And again, that is the same thing with mental health, that if somebody comes to you and say, you know what, I am struggling with this, I am struggling in this area, first of all, believe them. But Nelly, from your perspective, what do you think there's some key questions or key responses that we can respond? Because I know you asked one, how are you feeling today?
Yeah. Okay. So if, for me, if someone comes and opens up, which I've had quite a number of them, first
Mm-hmm.
of all, I acknowledge them for trusting me to open up, because that's their secret.
Yeah.
So I always acknowledge them and I thank them for choosing me to share their pain with me.
Mm.
And one of the questions that you can ask is, how can I help you today?
Mm.
We are, I mean, the society has trained us to always want to give advice, always want to give advice. Please keep your advice to yourself. People have their
Mm.
solutions within themselves.
Oh
What we
yeah.
can be doing is asking reflective questions to help the people to figure out solutions for themselves. Not
Mm-hmm.
that you just run and give advice. When you give advice, it's from your own personal perspective. And it might not align with the other person. You might give suggestions, but not advice.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So ask
Absolutely.
questions, ask open ended questions so that that
Mhm.
person is able to explain more. For instance, if they say they are struggling with something, you can ask, how long has that been going on for? Is that the first time you have had that experience? If they say no, you ask, when you have such experiences, how do you deal with it? So you are gathering information, and then
Mhm.
it's helping that person to reflect that, oh, I had this experience before, and this is what I,
Mhm.
I did. And you can follow up. When you took that action, what was the outcome? So you see, I'm asking open-ended questions to give that
Mhm.
person the chance to explore more. And it is a distraction technique in the sense that you are not focused on the painful negative experiences, but you are
Mhm.
talking about it in a more positive way. How did they get out of that?
Yeah. Absolutely. And one thing again, when we're talking as parents, we are talking about breaking the cycle, because the same way that our own parents raised up without talking about this thing, as parents now, we need to break the cycle so that we start teaching our children that it's okay and comfortable to talk about these things. So this is where the language that we use at home, and especially that empathy. If your child comes to you, just by your child coming to you a day and saying, "Oh God, I'm so stressed today," how do we respond to that? Because I know from parents, they oh, just put yourself together, you know. And sometimes parents will say, "Oh, you say you're stressed. What have you been doing? What have you done?" If you're saying you're stressed, what should I say? I've been to work, I've come back, I've cooked, I've cleaned, and this and that. So you're dismissing that child's
Yeah,
emotion, you're dismissing that child's feeling. And this is the first way that by you acknowledging, we need to start learning how to acknowledge and just start asking those open questions, just like Nelly said, oh, you know, responding, how are you feeling? How can I help you? What happened today? If a child comes and tell you, oh, it's a stressful day, you first of all, you're like, oh, I'm sorry to hear that. What happened? Can you tell me more what happened? You're at least acknowledging. So we need to start breaking that cycle as a community, because if we don't, then again, that taboo is just going to be a continuous cycle.
yeah, yeah, that's very true. Is to start breaking them down. And like we said, it comes down to communication because it's not just stand there, do this, don't do that. No, we need to be more explicit because children are so curious, they want to know more. So when they're asking those questions, answer them honestly, but again, be mindful. Whatever you are responding to needs to be child appropriate.
Yeah,
Yeah, appropriate to the
absolutely.
child's age. So another strategy that we can use, a practical strategy that we can use, is to encourage professional support. So let's talk about getting counseling, going for therapy, getting a life coach, because those are the people or the professions or professionals who are specialized in helping people to talk. They don't prescribe medication. They are the doctors who prescribe medication, or medical doctors who prescribe medication. But like counselors, therapists, life coaches or coaches, they just help you to talk and talk
Mhm.
and talk. And regardless of how severe your mental illness is, if you're on medication, continue taking your medication, because these other professionals, they have nothing to say as regarding your medication.
Mhm.
If you want to get off your medication or to stop your medication, you must contact your medical doctor who prescribed that medication for you.
Yeah,
We need to be
absolutely.
focusing on people's strength. There's so much talk about strength based approach, but sometimes it drift to the deficit approach where we look at the failings. You've not done that. You had to do this instead of, okay, you are good at, probably cooking, or you make sure every day your children have food. So it's for us to build that supportive community. Let's do events to raise
Yeah.
awareness on mental health, provide peer support groups,
Hmm.
well-being workshop initiative, make schools be mental or promote mental health education in schools, have community events, have community leaders who promote conversations around mental health. And also, as individuals, we need to be committed as well. Like Peggy and myself, we are here now. It's because we want to raise that awareness, because we have got to a certain level where we feel comfortable talking about mental health. So you watching as well, we call you to get into this circle, because
Yeah,
no one lives outside mental health. All of us are in it.
absolutely. And we may be talking right now, and you are also going through it. You may be experiencing it. We just want to say it's okay. What you are experiencing is real, and it's okay to talk about it. So, yeah, I think we've covered most of the topics. We've covered most of the topics, and like just like we say, Nelly and I, when we come here, we just speak from our own experiences, and we just want to, it's more still raising awareness within our community, because we know, look, it's not our fault. It's not our fault that we had the beliefs that we had. But the good thing is that we're in a technological world that we can step out there and learn these things. And you're not gonna get it just like that in a day. It's a continual process where we have to learn, because if as a community we start replacing judgment with compassion, then more people will feel safe enough to ask for help. And that is the kind of community that we want to raise, a community that is not full of judgment. Nobody is perfect. People are wrong. People will do things. We have our belief, but if we take out judgment and fill that judgment with compassion, then I think we've got a very, very long way, and we've got a very, very, we're going to get a community that is responsive to supporting each other when it comes to mental health. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I think you've just rounded that so smoothly. And yeah, it's been a pleasure coming here. We don't rehearse, so we just come and we say things the way they come out.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
thank you so much. And if you are struggling mentally and you want to talk to someone, please send us a direct message and we'll get back to you. We are here to help you. Or if you know someone who is struggling and they don't know where to get support from, you can come to us. If we are not able to support you in our own way, we can
Mhm.
direct you to somewhere to get the support. But remember, you don't have to wait until you get to crisis before you seek help. You can start small. Like Peggy talked about, there are YouTube. Use technology, but be very mindful, because sometimes it can take you down the rabbit hole. Because
Yeah.
even we talked about some support groups. There are some support groups that you will go there and they will drain you of your energy that you have. So just be mindful. You might want to step your tippy toes first and feel the energy in wherever you go to before you fully get in it. So
Yeah.
thank you so much, and I wish you all the very best.
We wish you the very best. Keep looking after yourself. Keep looking after your mental health, because you know what? It's very important.
Yeah, thank you so
So
much.
see you.
See you
Thank
in
you.
2 weeks. Thank you.